In today's video, we're going to install Cisco CallManager 4.13, eventually. But first, we're going to fail a lot. We'll hit missing drivers, broken installers, outdated documentation, and obviously incompatible hardware. And along the way, we're going to explore the guts of Windows PE, we'll reverse engineer some old Cisco install routines, and we'll try to breathe some life back into a system that's nearly 2 decades old. I'm Josh, your host, and this is Tech Tides. Today, we're going back in time, back to 2005, when Cisco CallManager 4.1 ruled the enterprise voice over IP world. But what happens if you try to install it today in 2025? Well, it's definitely not easy. But why CallManager 4.1? Well, it was one of the later Windows-based versions before Cisco ultimately switched to Linux, starting in version 5.0. That was around the year 2006, and at the same time Cisco rebranded the product from CallManager to Unified Communications Manager. There were later versions that supported Windows. There were versions 4.2 and 4.3 as well, but 4.1 at the time powered thousands of enterprises, while voice over IP was taking over legacy PBXs around the world. But today, trying to install it is a nightmare due to missing updates, lacking documentation, various incompatibilities, and bugs that we'll run into along the way. A company called Selsius Systems released the product, which they then called Multimedia Manager 1.0. It was originally designed as a video conferencing solution, not a voice system. By 1997, the product had shifted focus from video to voice, and it was renamed Selsius CallManager 1.0, now aimed at routing voice calls over IP networks, which was a relatively revolutionary idea at the time. A year later, in 1998, they released Selsius CallManager 2.0, and that's when Cisco stepped in. Realizing the power of IP telephony, Cisco acquired Selsius Systems later that year. From there, development accelerated under Cisco's watch. We got Cisco CallManager 3.0 through 3.3 between the years 2000 and 2002, as enterprises began moving from traditional PBXs to IP-based solutions. Then, in 2004, Cisco released CallManager 4.0 and 4.1, the versions that really cemented Cisco's place in the voice-over IP market. These versions scaled better, integrated with other collaboration tools, and were widely deployed in large enterprise environments. In 2006, we saw CallManager 4.2 released right alongside a major turning point, CallManager 5.0. That was when Cisco officially rebranded the product as Cisco Unified CallManager. Editor's note here. I previously incorrectly referred to the 5.0 release as Cisco Unified Communications Manager. That branding didn't actually happen until the 6.0 release. So 6.0 is when it was rebranded to Cisco Unified Communications Manager. Up until version 4.1, the product was actually named Cisco CallManager, and then starting in version 4.2, it was rebranded as Cisco Unified CallManager, and that lasted through the 5.1 release. Back to the video. And began the transition from Windows-based systems to Linux-based appliances. So while CallManager 4.13 wasn't the final Windows version, it could be considered to be the latest and greatest of what the year 2005 had to offer. In the past, installing CallManager 4.1 on non-Cisco hardware or hypervisors was actually relatively simple. There were well-known workarounds to do so. The basic process would be that you would install a vanilla version of Windows 2000 Server. You'd then modify some registry keys, install some specific Microsoft updates and software, and then you would apply an official Cisco operating system update that would then allow you to install CallManager. However, this doesn't work anymore because these Cisco operating system updates, as far as I can tell, have completely disappeared from the internet, which really makes this approach impossible. Okay, so the first thing we need to do here is create a new virtual machine. and we'll give it a name, just whatever works for you, doesn't really matter. Set the server, set the storage, and for compatibility mode, we're going to set this to ESX 4.0 and later. Operating system, we'll set it to Windows 2000 because that's what this is going to be using. CPU, we can leave it 1, and we'll set memory to 4 gigabytes. And hard disk, we're going to set to 80. Now, in this example, I'm setting it to a SCSI controller. We'll find out here soon that that doesn't actually work. This will need to be set to IDE. And we'll talk more about that later. So once we set these settings, we'll create this virtual machine, we'll start it up, and then obviously we'll need to mount an ISO file here. So we set the ISO, and then we can save this, reboot, and start the install. Alright, we're going to speed this way up here. You can see it attempts to start the install, but very quickly errors out with the message, "This version of the installation program does not support the hardware platform that was detected." So that's the first thing we have to try and work around. Okay, so let's start by unpacking our image here, our ISO file. Let's take a look at what's inside of it. So we'll first extract the primary ISO file here, and then we're also going to extract inside of that, there's a WinPE ISO image. We're going to extract that as well. And then we're going to take a look at that. And the next thing we need to do is the script that controls the logic here is actually encoded. And so we need to grab our script decoder here. And so we will then paste that into the scripts folder and grab the path there from the title bar, change that path, and then we are going to run the command that we need in order to decode this script. So that is cscript/no-logo script decode.vbs oinst.vbe, and then we will pipe that out to osinst.vbs, which will decode it. And then we can open that VBS file and we can take a look and see what's inside. As we look through the script, we see some of the different ways that Cisco does detection of different hardware, manufacturer, disk drives, things like that. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. We're going to speed through it because this doesn't actually accomplish the goal we need it to. Once all necessary changes have been made to the installation script, it needs to be re-encoded using the Windows script encoder. And then after that, it needs to be re-injected back into the ISO file. We'll leverage WinISO to do this. First, we'll open up the WinPE ISO file. Then we'll navigate to the scripts folder. We will unsuccessfully drag and drop our new OS installation in there. We have to actually use the add command to do that. First, we'll delete the old one. We will find the new one that we've updated, and that will inject that into the ISO file, and we'll go ahead and save that and overwrite the existing one. Once that's done, we need to open the original IP Telephony OS ISO file. We'll delete the old WinPE ISO file from there, and we will then add the new ISO file in its place that we just created. And then once again, we'll save that. We take that saved ISO, we'll connect it to our virtual machine. So we'll select it here, we'll start it up, and often VMware is a little too fast starting up for that ISO to get connected, so we'll restart. We'll speed this process way up here. Yes, we're okay to overwrite everything, and so it's going to go and try and install here one more time, but still failing, so on to something else. My next thought is, well, maybe it's looking for 2 hard drives, so let's go into our virtual machine, add a second hard drive, and we'll give that a try and see if that does anything different. Okay, so we've got our second hard drive set. We will get into our virtual machine here, power it up, and speed this up once again. And yes, we're going to proceed. And we are still not getting anywhere. Okay, so at this point I think, well, maybe there's something else in the installation script or install files that I missed. So taking another look there to see if I can find anything, and play around with a few things. I'll try this again, speeding this way up again, obviously, and nope, still not working. A couple of new error messages here if you continue on that we haven't seen before, but not really any change here, not making any kind of progress messing with this install script. My next thought was, well, maybe this is just a driver issue. So I was thinking I could just leverage the F6 option we get during Windows PE startup here to try and load some drivers. It works during normal Windows setup, so I thought maybe it would work here. So chose some different drivers that I had found, but As you can see, we're still getting format failed on that. I tried a bunch of different drivers with different combinations of SCSI, IDE controller, and VMware. Never could find a working combination, so either you can't load drivers like that during Windows PE setup, or something else is going on that's causing this to fail. My next thought is, well, maybe I can just inject the drivers into winxpoem.cif. I think maybe that's how it works in Windows PE. I'm not totally sure. So injected the drivers, updated the file, tried again, still no luck. Okay, so now I'm thinking, well, let me look at one of the Windows 2003 images and see kind of what that looks like. So extract that, extract WinPE. Again, we've got to decode the encoded install file here. So we will run the command line to do that. And then let's open it up and we'll see what we got here. So scroll through this file, see what we can learn. And what we learn is there's actually VMware logic directly in this version of the install script. So that's potentially good news. So let's see if we can just install this image and see if that gets us anywhere. All right, so we'll get the correct image mounted here and we will start the install. And so far this looks like it's doing something. So formatting the hard drives, deploying the image, and this process normally takes several minutes, but thanks to the power of editing, we're able to speed this up quite a bit here. So, okay, system and security updates, cleaning up. Okay, so that's promising. Should be time for a reboot here, and then we'll see what happens next. Okay, so back from a reboot, and we'll go through some of the typical Windows Server 2003 setup stuff here. And then we go into the Cisco configuration utility. This is part of the post-install process. This normally takes a ton of time. Right now we are at 30,000 times speed, so that'll get us through this really quick. Once that's done, we go through another reboot, and after we log in here, we'll do some basic maintenance. We will install VMware tools and get a couple other things going here. Once again, we will have a reboot. And then once we're done with that, we will fix our clock and we'll start a CallManager install. So we start the process, and then of course it fails because this is not the right version of Windows for this version of CallManager. Okay, so what we're going to try is we're going to extract the image file that comes from the Windows 2000 OS installation disk, and we're going to inject that into the Windows 2003 OS installation disk. So here we're extracting all the files from the Windows 2000 disk. We're going to do the exact same thing from the Windows 2003 installation disk. So we'll give that just a second here to finish. And then we are going to look at those files. We'll go into the images folder here. These are the two images that come with this disk. And so we're just going to rename those. We'll keep them around just in case we need them. But we'll go back to the Windows 2000 files. And there's a few different images here. This one I just picked based on what I saw in the install script. I don't know that it matters a ton, but this is just the one I selected. So, and we'll paste that in here to the Windows 2003, and this is where all the Windows 2003 files are. So we're going to take this file name from one of the original files, and we're just going to rename this file that we pasted in here. It's actually the Windows 2000 image. We're going to duplicate that, and then we're going to rename the copy the same thing as the other file that we had. So now we've got two files that have the same content but two different names. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take the post-install content from Windows 2000, and we're going to rename the original post-install from Windows 2003, just in case we need it. We're going to paste in the Windows 2000 post-install folder here. And then what we do need to do also is we need to take this copy update VMware file that's in there, and we're going to just grab one of these other files arbitrarily, these other batch files, and we are going to make a copy of that and rename it to match this VMware file. That way we've got a VMware post-install batch file that we can leverage to kick off the post-install install. Okay, so now we're going to go into the MCS folder, and we're going to edit one of the install config files here, this MCS HP file. We're going to copy the file name from the original post install, and we're just going to delete the line that references the HP drivers. And then we're going to, now the next step here is to basically rebuild this ISO. So we're going to make a duplicate of the original DVD ISO for the Windows 2003 OS version, and we're going to give that a new name that we can recognize. We're just going to add image 4.6 to it because that's the version of Windows 2000, the Cisco IP Telephony operating system we're using. So we'll open that up in WinISO, and then we are going to delete the original 2 image files that were part of that ISO, and we're going to go and add in the 2 new ISO or image files, which are actually the 2 old image files from Windows 2000. And then we're going to go and add the post install directory, delete the original post install directory that was part of the 2003 image, add the new post install directory that we built based on the Windows 2000 image, and then we're going to save this ISO to rebuild it here. Okay, so that's done now. So what we're going to do is mount that ISO into our VMware and give that a go here. And you'll notice I missed a step here. I had already set my hard disk to SCSI, and for the new install it's got to be set to IDE. So here we've got to set that back to IDE disk, and then we can try this one more time. So we'll just race through this again, and as you can see we are making progress here. Formatting, deploying, and getting through that image very quickly here. So we will be done with that in just a moment, and we will try this one more time. Okay, so ready for that reboot now. So go ahead and disconnect the media, restart this virtual machine, and now we can see, as we would expect, we see the Windows 2000 startup. We'll go through some of the basic Windows 2000 initial configuration tasks that we would normally see. And then we'll reboot again, and now we see what we would expect, which is good news, the Windows 2000 version of the Cisco configuration utility. So again, this is sped way up, helps this process take a little less time. So let's just watch this for a moment here, and there we go, there's our reboot. So we'll come up again here, and we'll sign into our machine. And again, do a couple little updates. We will install VMware tools, and we will have another reboot once this is done. So that is good. That's looking good, making some good progress there. And okay, so restarting. And then once this is done, we are going to do one other thing here. Just fix our display resolution. We're going to set an IP address here, static IP. And then we will shut this virtual machine down. Now, the reason we're doing this is, at least to me, SCSI controllers in VMware feel a little bit faster than IDE controllers. So now that we've got VMware tools installed, we can go in and change the hard disk controller from IDE to SCSI. So we've done that now. We're restarting, and Windows 2000 prompted us for another restart because it picked up the new controller, and then we will start on the CallManager install. Okay, so making a little bit of progress here, installing SQL Server, some of the prerequisites before we can actually start with CallManager. So we'll wait patiently on that. We need to switch to disk 2, CallManager installation disk 2, so we'll do that. And then we'll get in here a little ways, and we get an error message. So we're going to take a look at the logs and figure out what we can find here. We see something interesting related to configure SSL.pl, a Perl script. So we're going to look through a few more logs, and then we're going to dive into that Perl script. Now, part of the issue here is as we kind of continue looking through these logs, the Perl scripts that are here, they're only part of installs. So we've got to figure out a way to kind of capture those and back them up or archive them so we can really inspect them. So what we're going to do is we're going to rerun the CallManager installation again, and so that we don't have to rerun this whole installation over and over and over again, we're gonna run a utility here and find the actual installation command. We're gonna run process monitor. We're gonna back up the files for the DC directory installer, and we're gonna find the exact install command that Cisco's using to install DC directory. That way we can just install that one component over and over and over again, we can capture all of the files that it's trying to install, the libraries, the Perl scripts, all of that stuff, because we're going to need all that to really dig into this. So here's where we found that command line to run the DC directory installer. So we're gonna save that. We're gonna copy that out. We're gonna throw that into a batch file. That way we can just repeatedly run that however many times we want to. And what we've got now are a few batch files that I've set up to actually archive the scripts. There's some executables, some other temporary things that get deleted every time DC directory fails. So we're just running those scripts over and over again, and running this installer time and time again, because again, the goal here is to capture all those files. So now I think we've got everything. Trying to run this configure SSL script, but it's missing some libraries, so trying to get the paths, the Perl environment set up to actually get this to run. So it looks like we finally got there. We're now getting an error message. This one says error updating the config file. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on here. This is actually referring to the OpenSSL config file. So we've got to go, for some reason this OpenSSL config file isn't being generated on this system, and I still to this day don't know why that is. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go and we're going to manually construct one. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to fire up Notepad, and we're going to specify the exact path that it's looking for that config file. And then we're just going to manually build out this config file for OpenSSL. So got to set distinguished name. Got some options we're going to set here. And we'll just we'll continue on through this, setting this up. This is really just some experimentation that I went through, kind of trying to find the bare minimum config that would work to get this Perl script to continue, really. So I wasn't too concerned with the full functionality of that, making sure it was right. I was just trying to get the script to continue, which we've now done. And so now we're getting a new error. This one is saying there's an error creating the certificate file. So doing some investigation, kind of looking at that command line. I've ran that command line several times, added some different debugging in here to try and understand what's going on. Really looking at SSL tool, which is just OpenSSL. And so one thing I decided to do is trying to change the duration. The script by default is trying to set 20-year certificates that are generated. So I decided, I've never seen 20-year certificates before. I decided to drop this to 10. And lo and behold, when I set a 10-year certificate, that actually works. So now configure SSL.pl is working with a 10-year parameter. So what I decided to do is create some AutoHotkey scripts, and one of them is just going to monitor for the installation of OSL tool. So basically, when it detects that file's been dropped in the file system, it's going to then copy in a replacement OSL tool, which is just a compiled AutoHotkey script. And all that's going to do is look for that specific command line that generates the 20-year cert. And instead of doing that, it's going to rewrite it to generate a 10-year cert. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to try and run CallManager install again here and see if this little patch, this little workaround will work for us. So CallManager install is going to want to reboot. So we're doing that now. We'll give Windows a restart here. Give that just a moment to start back up. Okay, so get signed back in here, and the installer should continue. So hopefully this will go a little better. Now we've got to restart our monitor here since the computer restarted. Our AutoHotkey monitor went away. You can see the little H logo now down in the taskbar. So what we should see is once the OSL tool exe gets dropped on the file system by the DC directory installer, we should actually see that little H go away. So we can kind of keep an eye on that and monitor the progress of what's going on here. Okay, so there we go. We just saw the H disappear, and here it is. It's running. This is our modified OSL tool. You can see it says OSL tool real. That's a backup of the original file. So I don't think you would normally see this in an install. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But it is kind of interesting to actually see this. It tells us that something's working, so that's kind of nice. So this will run for just a moment and then it will disappear. The install will continue. And so it looks like we've managed to get past our issue that we had encountered. So that's good news. So we'll just kind of let this install finish here and should be able to get through this at this point. I think that's the last major issue we run into. Again, we'll run through several kind of stages of this installer, trying to get a CallManager to install here. So a bunch of different services that get installed as part of this. There's even some updates here at the end. We've got a SQL update that gets installed and a bunch of other stuff. So that's good. So that looks like that's making progress. Now it asks us to put disk 1 back in, so we will switch back to that. And that should pretty much complete the install at this point. Now we do get an error about MSXML. I don't think that's critical. I think that's because CallManager is actually expecting a slightly older version of the operating system, so I think we'll be okay there to continue. So now, the question we might ask ourselves is, what's going on here? Why did we have to make these manual changes to the CallManager installation? Well, after a bit of experimentation, research, trial and error, I discovered something that I hadn't really expected. There's a special event, shall we say, that happens at some point more than 10 years from now, but less than 20 years from now. And that special event is the year 2038 bug. Now, the year 2038 bug actually occurs January 19th, 2038, and it's actually caused by a Linux bug where the integer that stores the epoch to calculate time overflows. And so as of the time of this video, that's about 4,674 days roughly from now. So let's do some investigation to see if this is exactly what we're running into or not. Okay, so we're going to try, we started at 10 years there, we're going to try a few values kind of just around that. Starting with 4655, that we would expect that to work, it does. I do just a couple increments here just out of curiosity. 4656 we would expect to work. It looks like it does. Fix the clock here. Looks like it was a little bit off, so we'll just make sure that's right. 57, again, just a couple increments that we would expect that to work. Now we go back out to 20 years. Obviously that's broken. We're going to try a value of 5,000 days. That's broken. That's beyond 2038. 4,500 is, of course, within 2038, so we would expect that to work. So that seems to be okay. So that's kind of all working as we would expect. So let's see. Let's try something a little more close. I think on our clock we said we're 4673 days away. So let's put in 4673. We were 4673 and some change. So we would hopefully expect that to work. And it looks like, yeah, it looks like that works. So that's interesting. So now if we move that one more day, that should be beyond our date of year 2038. And sure enough, that fails. So it looks like that's probably behaving exactly how we would expect for something that's affected by the year 2038 bug. Now, obviously this isn't a Linux system, but OpenSSL is certainly has many roots in Linux. So not super surprising that we would see something like that may be affected by this kind of a bug. Okay, so let's try and do an install by changing the date and see if that fixes the problem. So first we're going to go into VM Tools, make sure we're not set to synchronize time with the host. So that's off. We're going to fix the time. I'm going to speed through this quite a bit here because you've already seen most of this. This is an older version of the Cisco IP Telephony operating system that I was playing around with. This is the 4.1 version. Definitely don't recommend it. There was a lot of manual stuff that had to be done to get this to work. So as you can see, our install is flowing along here pretty smooth at the moment. So it looks like we're making good progress here. We'll see if this gets all the way through without any errors. And again, all we did here is we changed the system clock from the year 2025 to the year 2013. And the only reason I chose 2013 is because the calendar lines up correctly, days of the week and everything. So somewhat arbitrary, but 2013 works because 2013 plus 20 is less than 2038. So, all right, looks like install is finished successfully. Switching back to disk 1. And yeah, it looks like this install has fully completed. So we're able to finish that. We even get the XML install to work that was broken earlier. Again, I think that's just because CallManager 4.1.3 probably wasn't expecting anything as new as IP Telephony Operating System 4.6, so that was another thing I was experimenting with here. But again, I think that newer operating system is the better way to go instead of this one. So yeah, looks like this is working. So we'll let this get booted up, and then we'll take a quick look at the services here. Okay, so we are almost in here. We'll let Windows 2000 finish getting booted up here. We'll log in, and we'll take a look at the CallManager services here. So to get to that, we'll go to the Start menu, and we'll go to Programs, we'll go to Cisco CallManager, and we'll go to Configuration, and we will log in with the username and password we defined during setup. And yep, definitely accept everything that we've got here. All that's good. We're going to check all of these boxes. We're going to enable all of the services here, and that way we can actually use this system. So we'll check mark all those, we'll hit update, and then this will take just a few seconds to refresh all of those services. So give that just a moment. We should refresh on its own here momentarily. There we go. Looks like that is probably all set. So yeah, I think we're good there. So we'll now switch back. We'll go to CallManager again. We'll go to the actual CallManager interface. And there we go. Look at that. Looks like we've got an operational version of CallManager 4.13. So there it is. CallManager 4.13 running in 2025. It's quite the adventure, wasn't it? But we're not done yet. We didn't even have a chance to really look at the interface. So definitely going to be doing that at some point. Maybe next episode, we'll get some phones registered and working. Got an old switch to plug those into, so we could play around with that. Thought about trying other hypervisors to see if this is possible on that. I don't know, it might be interesting. I also want to set up Unity and some of the other tools if I can get them to work. So we'll see what we can come up with. Ultimately, I'd like to put together a video series that covers an entire collaboration-based system just from the year 2005. So that's something I'm interested in doing as well. Have you worked with CallManager 4 or older? You have anything still running? Let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. Until next time, this is Josh.